Good morning to you. Now, you, a couple of years ago, went to see someone. Tell me what happened.
Right, I went to see a fortune teller who was interested, who used the method of psychometry for telling fortunes as well as the tarot cards.
What does that mean?
That means holding an object of personal value to pick up the vibes it might have. And from doing this, quite often there's kind of like a flow of ideas which comes through from doing this.
So what did he hold of yours?
Right, I gave him a ring of mine and he was holding it and he was speaking and then suddenly he stopped and he said, I can see a pain specific to women. I can see a women's sort of pain. And I thought, what's he talking about here? And he said, please get it checked out straight away. So when I left, I was thinking, what could he mean? What should I get checked out? I'd had a cervical smear done about 6 months before and that had been fine, but I was thinking, I wonder if it is connected with some gynecological illness. So I went to hospital and had a smear done, and unfortunately, when the results came back, it showed that I actually had cervical cancer, that had gone through all the phases of precancerous abnormal cells, and I had to have very prompt, immediate treatment. And I really feel that if I hadn't been to see that fortune teller, I would not be here today to tell the tale.
On the face of it, that is an astonishing story. I mean, you'd had this test,
Yes.
It was all clear, there was
Yep.
no indications at all
None whatsoever.
that you got any problem?
Nope.
Until you went to see this chap
Yes.
who rubbed your ring.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no doubt in the mind of the surgeons you talked to that this was an emergency.
Yes, yeah. I had to be treated straight away, immediately.
How do you account for that? I mean, were you a believer in this sort of thing before you... Well, I mean, obviously you must have been sympathetic towards it to go along in the first place.
Yes, I mean, I suppose I was a believer, really, but I could just tell when it was the urgency with which he said, look, get this sorted out, that made me worried. I mean, and it's just something you can't afford to mess around with. I would have missed the kind of net for screening had I not taken the initiative to go and get it sorted out. And it's just not something I'd like to think about, the alternative, if I hadn't gone.
Yeah, because being the age you are and having had a test, a
Yes.
smear a couple of years previously, presumably you wouldn't have bothered again for some time.
Of course not another 5 years.
So as you say, it is, in your view anyway, entirely possible that you would not be with us today
Yeah.
but for this person.
Exactly.
Do you still go to them?
I've been once since, but unfortunately this particular fortune teller has passed away. So, but I've definitely got an open mind and it's made me think about things.
I'll bet it has. Thanks for talking to us. Maybe we'll pop back and have another chat in a minute. Let me have a word with Pat. You went to... Who do you go and see? Sometime.
Oh, Sasha.
You've been several, but
Yes,
one in particular told you something quite dramatic.
Yes, yes.
And who was this?
Karina in Tooting.
Right, and what does Karina do?
Well, she seemed to tell me a complete and utter fairy story. She does the cards.
She does the cards, right?
Yes.
She's got the old...
Playing cards, not tarot cards.
Oh, playing cards, right. And so she lays them all out on the table. You've gone along there with a chum, haven't you?
Yes, I have indeed.
Yeah, and a bit cynical about it.
It was the first time ever. Completely clueless about it.
Yeah, I mean, you
I didn't...
take it or
Oh,
leave it,
yeah?
yeah?
Yes.
All right. So
Curiosity.
she lays the cards out, and what does she say?
Told me this complete and utter fairy story about my husband having an affair with somebody I knew. And I laughed. I thought it was really funny. I really did.
How long have you been married at that time?
Oh, at that time, about 12 years.
And everything's hunky-dory?
I thought it was, yes.
Yeah.
This was in about 68.
Uh-huh.
I laughed. I thought it was funny. I
Sure.
told him. He thought it was funny. He thought it was a waste of money.
So what changed your opinion about that?
I got divorced in 75.
You got divorced in 75. Why did you get divorced?
He was having an affair with somebody I knew.
Had the lady you'd seen with the cards given you the name or just said someone you knew?
No, somebody I knew.
And how long had he been having this affair with someone
Well,
you
my
knew?
solicitor got it back to 10 years.
So at the time the lady told you,
He was deeply involved.
deeply involved, what was your reaction when you realised all this?
Well, when I actually realised what she said
Yeah.
was true, a little bit astounded, I suppose. How could she know? How could somebody know?
Have you ever come to any sort of resolution of that question in your mind? I mean, have you ever worked out why it was possible
I'd
for
love to know how they know. I'd love to know how they know things that you're not even aware of.
Do you go... Have you been since?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
My curiosity is... Yes.
And have they had the same unnerving accuracy since then?
The good ones, yes. like in everything, there's good and bad.
Who else? Hands up the people in the audience who've been to see, I'll call them fortune tellers, for want of a better description, right, and had a good experience. Right, lady on the back row here. Right, what happened?
Well, I'd been married, that was behind me. I'd met somebody who turned out to be a right con man. Was feeling really desperate, went to see this lady who had warned me a few years previous to this con man. She told me that things looked really, really desperate, but I had to keep my chin up because there was a gentleman who knew of me, but I didn't know of him at the time. This was in the January. In the September, before the leaves fell, I'd be married to this man. And at the time I thought, that's impossible, I haven't even got a divorce from my first marriage yet. Anyway, 2 weeks after seeing this lady, I met the gentleman. I had written in an advert in a paper, saw this gentleman, hadn't heard from him by then. He replied to my letter. We're now married. I went back to her to thank her for what she'd said, kept my spirits up. She then told me that he was going to go through an operation, and I didn't really want him to have it because he'd had a vasectomy for 11 years. And he thought he'd be able to give me a child. I thought, after 11 years, I don't think he would. So we had a chat with the hospital, and they said it was a 40–60% chance against.
Of reversing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But however, the clairvoyant had said, you will have a little son from this. Let him go through with it. He did go through with it. I've now got an 11-month-old son.
Well, I'm delighted. I mean, well, yes, brilliant.
Everything came out roses, but had I not have seen that lady, I would have went back up north where I come from, because I just thought things were so desperate that there was no outlook down here for me.
Anybody else who's had... Right, lady here.
Well, in 1982, I was working on a ship, and in San Juan, I drove with a couple of shipmates of mine, and we went to an 85-year-old German woman, and she laid out my forecast for the next 12 years. And everything that she has said has come true.
Example?
She said I would marry my husband. I'd only known him for a month.
Now, hang on a tick. Let me challenge this.
Yeah.
She said, you will marry the guy you're currently going out
Yes,
with.
she also did she did numerology as well, and she did his numbers, and she said, this is the person you will marry. She gave me the years. She even gave me the year that my son would be born, and he was. And
She got the sex right?
she didn't, well, no, she didn't. She said, you will have a child. I'm waiting for the second one that she said.
Okay.
But she did go up till the age of 37, 38, and I am approaching that time. So I'm coming to the end of my forecast. And I did go to a fortune teller, well, clairvoyant in the Northeast, where I just came from, and I've been with him for 6 years now. And I don't really want to have to keep going back up there, so I'd like to find one in this area.
Well, no better place to advertise for one than here. Maybe we'll introduce you one in a couple of ticks. Gentleman in red. Yes, sir. Your experience.
Yes, in August '87, I went to a clairvoyant convention, '89 rather. My wife was a believer, and she went there, and I was sitting around.
Now, were you a believer at this stage?
Not really, no,
you,
not
like
at all.
Most men, cynical.
Very cynical.
Women stuff, this.
That's
yeah.
right, yeah. And I'm sitting in this room, and my wife's talking to a gentleman at one table, and all the other tables are occupied, apart from one lady who was on her own, and I'm sitting here on my own, and I thought, oh, for a tenner, I'll go and... So I paid my tenner over, and she gave me a tape and said that I would be going abroad, and that I would be entering a competition, and that I would win it. And in August 1990, I went to Canada for the World Town Crime Championships, and I won it.
Now, how long is it between her prediction and
A year.
A year. On the
And
face
I'm going
of it,
again in June, and I'd like to know whether I'm going to win again.
Chris, I have to say, on the face of it, these are very, very impressive stories, aren't they?
I do agree
I mean,
entirely.
it's... What do you say to Jane?
I mean, this is, as a psychologist, my interest is really in two different angles. Firstly, there's the question of whether going to actually see psychics, fortune tellers, actually is a useful thing to do. Does it serve a useful social function? And in replying to that question, I'd say almost definitely yes, most of the time.
Hang
Most
on.
of the time.
This is the point for now. Do you actually believe this? Do you actually think that it is possible for the sort of people that they've been to see, fortune tellers we'll call them, to predict with any degree of certainty what they say they can predict?
Well, in response to that, I'm afraid I have to say no. Now, that's not to say that I doubt any of the stories that we've heard today. I'm sure that what happened, by and large, happened as reported. One thing to bear in mind is that on a programme like this, inevitably, you want to make good television. So you're going to have people phoning in with their own accounts. You're going to select the ones that make the most interesting television, the most dramatic stories,
Sure.
and that is exactly what
Sure.
I expect you to
Yeah,
do.
but they've all happened.
So this is, oh, I'm not denying
Oh,
that.
they believe
I'm
it
not
happened,
denying
yeah.
that. But the only way to actually establish whether there really is anything in these claims of being able to tell the future is actually to do properly controlled studies.
So you're saying there's no scientific evidence to suggest that people can make these sort of predictions with any degree of accuracy?
Unfortunately, when these things are actually examined properly under controlled conditions, you tend to find that the predictions, that there are all kinds of psychological factors which are involved in going to see psychics, in possible distortions of memory as to what was actually said, various other kinds of factors which I can go into if you want me to.
Well, in time we will. In time.
My experience with the distortion of memory, I've given an example.
Now, as I said, I didn't say that you're
No, but I'm just saying that my story is a truthful story. I would not be here today had I not taken that advice. There would be no reason for me to go and have another SMID, and what would be the reason, seeing that the
one
woman
thing
6
that
months
did occur to
previously
me during
been
your
fine.
story, and again, I mean, really, I would want to resist commenting on individual stories. As I made very clear, I don't doubt
Yes.
your account of the story, and I'm sure that what you said is what actually happened. The point that I'd make there is that you were the person that opened the show because it was a very dramatic story. How many other people have been to see fortune tellers and come away with nothing anywhere near as dramatic? So
It is remarkable.
it is it's remarkable because we are impressed by coincidences.
All right, let me...
No, let me finish, please.
Go on.
I mean, inevitably, lots of people will go and see fortune tellers. For some, there'll be general statements, some of which will be correct, most of which will be correct. For others, there'll be statements which appear to be just far too accurate to possibly be put down to coincidence.
I hear what you're
But-
saying, Chris. I hear what you're saying, but let me put this point to Lynette, who's also a parapsychologist, a journalist and a broadcaster, and has studied it too. Now, and is more sympathetic to it. I mean, in essence, what he's saying is, with certain exceptions, and he's making her one, you can generalise.
No, what he's
You can
actually...
make it work.
What he's actually saying is, these people aren't lying, but I'm saying they are. I mean, he's actually saying both things. And it does not work, Chris. It doesn't work to say coincidence. I mean, people go to fortune tellers and they're told surnames of people they're going to meet. They're told ages. They're told addresses. I mean, it is quite astonishing. And as a scientist, you should be looking into the mechanics of it, not saying it can't happen.
But he says he's looked into the mechanics of it, there's nothing there.
Well, that's not true. The Society for Psychical Research has huge amount of research ongoing. There is a huge amount of research, not only into fortune-telling, positive research, not only into fortune-telling, but into other astonishing phenomena like, for example, remote viewing. If he cared to look at it with a truly open mind, I think you would have a different point of view.
And an open heart.
And
okay.
an open heart.
Before we come back to
Can I
Chris,
just reply to this?
before we come back to Chris, let me meet someone who actually practices this, and that's Denise here. Now, Denise, in effect, in terms of an impression, what Chris is creating down there is the impression that people like you are kidding us, really.
Yeah, I can understand why he thinks that. I mean, when I first realised that I could predict certain things for people, I thought it was an amazing coincidence.
Now, this interests me.
Because I am a sceptic.
You,
basically.
like the rest of us, come onto this earth as an ordinary mortal,
Yep.
right? And at some stage in your life, according to you, you get this gift, this message, yes? Right.
It was a gradual thing. It didn't just all happen overnight.
But what was it?
It was just the ability to look at somebody and see either that they had an illness or that something was going to happen to them, either good, bad or indifferent, and wondering why. And transferring that information when necessary and, if possible, to that person, because there's a great responsibility when you're dealing with people that, A, you don't act like something from the Ides of March,
Sure.
and B, frighten people.
Sure.
But sometimes, like this lady here, somebody will see something that can literally be of mind-blowing benefit to them.
But you are convinced that in what percentage of cases you get it right? I mean, have you done any sort of
No.
market research into your own efforts, as it were?
Well, people keep coming back, which I think is a good indication.
But there may be many reasons for them coming back.
The comment on the lapse of memory, I actually tape my readings, so there's no lapse of memory on the client's part, so that they can actually listen to it and say, oh yeah, she said this and she said that. So if they wanted to take me to task, I'll go back over everything. There is a record.
What, young man on the back who had his hand up, what do you say to Denise?
Well, initially, when you introduced the programme, you said that to our society today, it's far more uncertain than it has been for a while. That's how I understood what you were saying.
Yeah,
now,
in these uncertain times.
Yeah.
An oblique reference to the recession.
Yeah. I mean, as a Christian, I'd say that we're also more... we're in a situation where a bit... a godless society than we were a generation ago. And what I'd say really as a Christian is that the Bible says clearly that you should not consult these people, that you shouldn't do it. And I take, Jane, what you say, and what I'd like to say as a Christian is that that God didn't come down, you know, and say, this is your problem, this is what I want to heal. Jesus came down and said, look, your real problem is sin. And it's rebellion to God, and that is something.
Can I just? I'd like to. I think the moral side of this is really, really important. But what we're addressing at the moment, and I'll come back to the moral side, is whether it works. Lady there, does it work?
Yes, it does. And also, I feel that you're also fulfilling a need, but
Yeah.
also high money. And they actually do a lot of damage to people. I've seen people that go regularly and they suffer terribly. I mean, they really suffer. I mean, mental suffer where they have to go on the pills because of a reading. And I feel that if you take money anyway, I feel this is wrong. I feel it's like Judas. If you got a gift from, if you say it's from God, then you don't take money.
Well,
you do it because you love to do it.
Quick word, then we're going to go to the break, otherwise I get sacked.
I
Go on.
think anybody who is unbalanced is going to be unbalanced by anything. And when you go for a reading, you don't leave your brains at the door.
Okay,
But the
fair
effect
point.
is astounding on people because they're going because they need questions answered for some reason, some turmoil in their life, and they're going for help. For help, you're taking on a big responsibility.
Okay, I'm going to
by
pause you
answering.
there because the impact of fortune telling is something we want to address, and the moral implications we want to address in part two. We have to take a break now. When we come back, we'll meet amongst others Marion here, because Marion was addicted to going to fortune tellers, and she says she married the wrong man because of prediction, and it made her life hell. Wasn't funny for her. Wasn't funny for her. That story and a lot more in part two. Don't go away. You went to see one of these card readers, didn't you?
Yes, I did, a tarot card reader.
What did she tell you?
She told me I was going to marry a slim man with an Irish accent, and I was going to have a lovely house in Ireland with roses growing up the side, and a wonderful, successful life. We were going to have a successful business. I did marry an Irishman.
Slim?
Yes, with an obvious accent.
Yeah. House?
No.
No. But the first bit was right.
Yeah, I thought that would come later.
Yeah.
He turned out to be a womanising alcoholic, with all the traits that go with it, the lies and the deceit. It was a really horrendous marriage for myself and for my children. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Numerous times I tried to take my own life. I'd even been DOA at a hospital from it, just desperate to get out. Fortunately for me, during my time in hospital, I found there was an alternative way. And I'm glad, because it gave me peace.
Now, let me ask you this, Marion. That was obviously a very distressing and difficult time for you. Do you think that having met this woman, you actually went out purposely looking for someone of that nature?
Oh, I'd been addicted for years. I'd been to all sorts, looking, for hope.
But when she said to you, it will be a slim Irishman, I mean, do you actually
Yes,
look round for a
I suppose you
slim...
do. I suppose you do. Every time you meet somebody, if they've got an accent or they're a slim build, you think, is this the person?
Is this the one? Yeah. And was there a bit of you that perhaps made it happen?
I think you do. I think because you've got a tape with it on that says it's going to happen, you manipulate, subconsciously maybe, but you manipulate situations to make their predictions happen.
You've got lots of hands up. So we'll speak to Julie first. You're addicted too, aren't you? I mean, how often do you go and see one of these people?
About 3 times a week at the moment.
3 times a week. How long have you been doing that?
On and off for 10 or 12 years now.
Have you any idea how much you've spent during that time? It costs money.
Thousands of pounds.
Pardon?
Thousands of pounds.
Thousands of pounds. Am I right in saying that one day you went from Dartford in Kent, which is where you live, all the way to Cornwall,
Yes.
just to see someone for half an hour?
And it wasn't very good even, but I had to go because I, you know, she said, oh, well, I can help you with your problem. And I got down there and it was okay, but, you know, I could have phoned a friend and had the same chat. But then I've had some wonderful readings. I've had a lot of big choices to make in my life, and they helped me, or I thought they helped me point me in the right direction, and the outcome has been good.
Why do you feel the need to go and see these people?
Perhaps I'm searching for something I can't find within myself. And because you get some that are very good, it's like an addiction. Once you've had very good results, you want to go and you keep asking questions. And some of my friends are worse than I am. They ask what even they should have for Sunday dinner, pork or beef or whatever they're going to do. You know, it's ridiculous.
Are you serious about that?
Yes. Some people I know can't make any move without doing it. They go and ask, are their boyfriends messing about? What does the woman look like? And some of these fortune tellers will give you descriptions and everything, which is naughty, really.
Lady there, why do you go?
It's a form of counselling almost for me now. I've been going to Cindy Ann, who reads the tarot cards, for the last 7 years. And a few years ago, she predicted that I was going to meet a gentleman who's going to be very important in my life, who's going to be a lot older than myself, but it would be a happy relationship. And it was about a year or so later that I actually met this gentleman. She even told me his occupation. He was an engineer. I met him in a completely different field. I actually went to his house to give him a demonstration of a cleaning system. And it was only on the first date, after he invited me out, that I found out he was an engineer. But unfortunately, about a year or so later, after I had been living with him, we found out he had cancer. And unfortunately, after that, he died. And since then, I've been going to Cindy Ann, and every now and again, I do get a message from him. I mean, the most important one I can remember was he asked me if I remembered a pair of pink shorts that he bought me on holiday. Well, nobody could have possibly have known that. And yes, I did. And he was just saying, basically, pull yourself together and you've got to get on out and live your life.
Lady here.
2 years ago, I worked in Hong Kong for radio and television as a studio producer. And these people have sort of actually gone to a medium, you know, or to a clairvoyant. In my situation, we actually had one coming on the show live. Actually, if anybody was watching the programme last year, they'd have heard that side of it, because I actually had an experience in the studio, because I'd lost my mother 3 weeks before. As a result of this, I couldn't let go. So before Rosemary left Hong Kong, I actually went for a private sitting with her. Bearing in mind, we'd arrived in Hong Kong in the October. We're now in February. She basically told me, through my mother and father, that we would actually be leaving Hong Kong, or leaving the province, within sort of 4 or 5 months. That my husband would be changing his occupation. Now, as I say, we're into 2 years into Hong Kong. And I didn't laugh, but I said, no, this isn't right, you know, Colin's staying in, and if hopefully he's going to take a commission, and here we go, you know. She said, well, she said, your mother and father are also telling me, she said, you're going home. She said, but I don't see it as geographically going home. She said, but you're going home. Well, 7 years previous to this, I'd actually sold, through divorce and what have you, I'd sold my house. But it had been my home because my father had purchased this house. Anyway, cutting a long story short, May came around, my husband was discharged with the people he was working with, decided to come out of the army. Within 3 or 4 weeks, we were shipped back to UK.
What I'm seeing here, Denise, thank you for telling that story. What I'm seeing here, Denise, is a situation where people like you can undoubtedly do a lot of good to people who need some comfort, yes? You can be a prop. But potentially you can also do some harm, because let's face it, you are not trained counsellors, and yet you are in a sense dishing out advice, or what they perceive as advice.
Yeah, there's 2 points here that are very important. Firstly, anything that becomes obsessive is not healthy. It's totally unnecessary to go to see anybody who tells fortunes more than once every 6 months, as far as I'm concerned, if you have a good reading. There's no point in constantly going back. It's a bit like the overzealous Catholic who wants to go to church 18 times on a Sunday.
Or a member of any religion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Anything that's obsessive isn't healthy. The other thing is that...
the advice bit on top.
Yes.
I mean, people do see people like you as a prop. There's no question about that.
Yes, that's true. And the problem is that the exceptions make the rule. There are certain charlatans, obviously, that are around that will say things to boost their own ego, to make themselves look good, to please the customer, client, whatever. The biggest thing is that the cards, whatever medium that you're using to predict the future is an indication. It's not a dictation.
Meant to be a guide.
Those people have their own free
Right.
will to either act upon... This lady here needn't have gone
No,
to have her health
sure.
checked, but she did.
I've got lots of hands up, and that lady's going to burst a blood vessel if I don't go to her. Right. If that's all it is, a guide and a bit of assistance, perhaps a prop for maybe fragile people, what's wrong with it?
Well, basically, it doesn't come from God Almighty. I was doing what you do
But
many
lots of
years
people,
ago.
with due respect, lots of people don't get guidance from God Almighty either.
No,
They do
lots
quite
of
well.
people don't, but what I would like to say is that God Almighty has given us his Holy Spirit for guidance, and Jesus, who is God, died on the cross so that we can receive guidance from God. And what I would say is, who do these people think are guiding them? What is the force? What is the power?
This is a gift from God.
Can I just...
Can I
One at a
be
time.
No,
Ladies
it's
first,
because
go on.
you're dabbling with spirits, and that's
How can
totally
God-
against.
Can
Yes,
I
but you're,
spirit?
it
We
says
worship him in spirit
it
and
actually
in
says
truth.
categorically
That's right.
that he will turn against people who consult
It's
spiritism.
abomination to him.
Can I just intervene for a tick, if I may, because we could get locked into a long and sort of rather complicated discussion about the scriptures and about that, which is perhaps for another, is interesting, but it's perhaps for another show. What I'm trying to establish at the moment is whether or not these people are a force for good or evil.
Evil.
Right?
Definitely.
Talk to her about what she did. What
Yeah.
she did.
Gentlemen there.
Can I just point out that, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, you shouldn't talk to spirits because it's evil. I just point out that we are all spirits within a body.
But our spirit either goes to heaven or hell.
Lady down there, let's just talk. We've had some on this side saying force for evil, and they've outlined their reasons why, and and told us where they're coming from, for which we're grateful. What about you?
Well, it's definitely good. I mean, like, this is my sister-in-law now, and Lee Bennett here is I
am a practising clairvoyant in Bournemouth.
Right, he's not after it to make money.
7
He
days
hasn't
a week.
charged my mum for one single visit. Yet, now he predicted that Trina's life would change. Well, she got run over by an 18-wheeler lorry, and if she hadn't had the fact that she was going to cope from Lee Bennett, then she would have just given up living.
So
you
let
know?
me just get this straight. You had an accident.
I went to see Leah in January.
Before or after the accident?
Before.
Before the accident.
January 1990, I went
No, he
to
didn't
see
predict the
him.
accident. I'm not being flippant.
No,
He didn't
no.
predict the accident.
He said that in 1990 something would happen to change my life forever. In 91, I'd have a new family, and 92, I'd learn to cope with it all. I went on holiday 2 months later. I got run over by an 18-wheeler lorry, which certainly did change it. I've now got an artificial leg. I met my husband, who I married in 91, and I had a daughter that I'd previously been told that my womanly bits were damaged and I wouldn't have children.
And has he been a comfort to you?
He kept me going. If he hadn't told me that it was going to get better in 91 and 92, I'd have given up.
Playing with your emotions.
Okay. Gentleman in blue.
It's playing with your emotions.
One second.
No, come on.
One second. This lady came to see me of her own free will. I am 69, and I have been doing this since I was a boy. Threepence for one hand, sixpence two. And before you were born, young man, I jumped out of aeroplanes.
We will hear no one is two talk at once.
From Africa, Sicily, Italy, Greece, swam out of Arnhem. My grandparents were clairvoyants. My father was a clairvoyant. I still go to Widdicombe Fair at St.
Listen, I'm not doubting your antecedents.
She came of her
You've
own
been a
free
comfort
will.
for her.
He didn't know me. No, I went there in the January.
She came of her own free will.
This one's all right.
It's a good
I wouldn't have met my
clairvoyant.
husband.
Right. Okay.
Good clairvoyant.
And there's bad. Let's just test one thing. Before this show started, right, Denise read the cards of Beverly, who was sitting alongside her. In a nutshell, what did she tell you?
Nutshell,
You wrote it down, yeah?
I wrote down a couple of things, and one which was correct was a celebration, and my best friend's getting married in September, and that was a marriage that I'm looking forward to later on. And my husband's Gemini, and she said my husband would be Gemini. And also, when I came into the world, I had a bad time being born, and that was true. My mum had a terrible time.
So she got some things right?
So a couple of things were right, yeah.
And how many wrong?
It was very brief. It was only 5-10 minutes.
All right.
It's only a couple of things
Okay.
wrong.
Lady here.
I went to a clairvoyant nearly 2 years ago, and she turned around and predicted that my other half was seeing another woman. She could see this other woman. She also turned around and told me that basically I was going to lose my home. I have now been repossessed, and I'm due to be evicted in a couple of weeks.
Quick spot of advice to people who want to go to these people and from whom they might get some comfort.
I would say, as a general rule, probably most of these cases, they're actually getting what's untrained counselling, but counselling, and it's helpful.
Yeah.
The point is that with all the stories that we've heard today, we've had very little by way of the anecdotal evidence. This is why the Society for Psychical Research themselves stopped using anecdotal evidence, because they recognised the room for psychological biases to come in.
Okay. So go, but treat it with caution, which is what even you would say.
Yes.
Try your best to avoid charlatans. Absolutely right.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't become addicted to it. It's not the end of the world. And take it for what it's worth, which is untrained counselling and advice. If it helps you, it helps you. Great. I've got to say bye-bye. See you same time, different place Monday. Have a nice weekend. Time now for This Morning. Toodaloo.